Here, we have had, for the past month, an issue of anti-Semitism addressed, particularly black anti-Semitism, through the mainstream press. And you've written an article which appeared, a terrific 3-4-page article in the Jewish Journal this week. How is this recent incident now affecting people's attitudes and concerns?
There's been a disturbing surge of anti-Semitism. I call it Jew hatred, because anti-Semitism makes it sound too scientific, makes it sound too clinical. And it's very interesting. Over the last 3, 4, 5 years, I've started hearing from my students more and more, both the ones who come from Jewish day schools and come to Israel, but also those who just come from public schools, more examples of anti-Semitism, more examples of feeling outed and othered as Jews. And it's so shocking because it's a point in time in history when people are supposed to be more tolerant. And what we're seeing on American campuses is that you're supposed to not have microaggressions against anybody, but somehow macroaggressions are acceptable against Jews. And these last couple of weeks, people have been completely upset about the I call him the bigot formerly known as Kanye West controversy. And I'm a little bit wary, because if we just focus on the celebrities, we miss what Zev Jabotinsky, the great Zionist thinker, called the anti-Semitism of things. If we just focus so much on what's happening in celebrity culture and Twitterville, we miss what's really going day to day, what too many of my students and too many of my fellow Jews in the United States of America are experiencing. All of a sudden, a certain sense that we're on trial. All of a certain sense that the golden age in America is over. Now, I'm an optimist. I still think more anti-Semitic incidents end in America with what I call a happy ending, which is that fundamentally the president, whether it be a Republican or Democrat, the leadership, the corporate leadership, always condemns it. But we're starting to see this insidious impact of this just kind of constant barrage against Israel, and a constant barrage against Jews, and a constant barrage against Jews as white, all of which are distortions, and all of which are based on some very old tropes, now modernized for the 21st century and weaponized in the 21st century.
What do you think about these allegations that Jews control Hollywood today, because there are a lot of Jewish people who work in the arts, whether it's writing, agents, lawyers, accountants? Do they run Hollywood?
To relate to, obviously, the thing that many people think about today, Dave Chappelle's monologue, no one should be using "the" before any group. Not the Jews, not the women, not the blacks, not the gays, because that use of the word "the" is to clump people together. And not to see, for example, we know that in the Jewish community, for example, right now, we have Jews who are pro-Trump and Jews who are anti-Trump. We have Jews who are hypercritical of Israel and Jews who are delightedly in love with Israel, as I am. And so why would people find it so necessary to reduce people to this one characteristic? We know what that's called. That's called bigotry. If we do it to African Americans, it's unacceptable. If we do it to women, it's unacceptable. And if we do it to Jews, it's unacceptable as well. I haven't done a statistical survey. Are there many Jews in Hollywood? Perhaps. Are there many Jewish voices in Hollywood? Certainly. But does that mean that Jews control Hollywood? Absolutely not. And as you point out, certainly these days, corporations control Hollywood. You know, the corporations are these multidimensional, very complex organisms that have multiple sources of cash, often multinational perspectives. And frankly, if the Jews controlled Hollywood, we'd have a lot more pro-Israel films out there. I've been looking for one exciting pro-Israel film to tell our amazing story, and it hasn't happened.
Since the movie Exodus in 1965, approximately, there has not been a story about the legitimate establishment of the State of Israel until maybe the movie Munich, which was not even directly about Israel.
And frankly, it was not one of my favorite Steven Spielberg movies, and I found it quite morally ambiguous. I didn't think that it gave the clarity, the moral clarity of that around that incident that it should have. And I always had this fantasy. In fact, I wrote this book, Why I'm a Zionist, 20 years ago, and in it I actually had this fantasy that Steven Spielberg would make a big, epic Exodus-type picture about the 67 war and show how terrifying it was in May 1967 to be in Israel and actually to be a Jew anywhere in the world, where all of a sudden they had hundreds of millions of people throughout the Arab world threatening to kill the Jewish people so briefly after the Holocaust that we had no choice but to take that threat seriously. And then in 6 days, the euphoria, the unity, and that picture hasn't been made. I also think right now, as we build up to the 75th anniversary of the State of Israel in April 2023, we should be putting all our collective heads together as lowercase d Democrats, people who love democracy, and saying, how do we celebrate this 75-year-old experiment in liberal democracy in the rocky soil of the Middle East? And I think Hollywood creativity should be used to celebrate 75 moments of the State of Israel, like we did bicentennial moments back in 1976. I think maybe we should have one big hootenanny on television or on a live stream or on film to celebrate the amazing achievements of the State of Israel. I'm not seeing that happen. So if the Jews really controlled Hollywood, they do a much better job of pushing a Jewish agenda. And that was all in quotation marks.